Welcome back to the kickoff. Me and the lads are back again to talk about Arsenal, the title race, their first defeat of the season, although they've already dropped points in multiple draws this season. It isn't looking great for their title challenge. We're going to start, lads, with this red card because that was game-defining, game-changing. Joey, you witnessed a eerily similar incident in your game. So when you're comparing the two and when you're looking at the lack of consistency with referees, what do you make of this?
Well, you say eerily similar, but I'm going to argue that they weren't that similar. Now, obviously, the second that happened, firstly, I'm absolutely shitting myself, if I'm being completely honest, because we've got the context of what had happened with Saliba the day before, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, continuity, consistency, we're probably going to see a red card here. However, what I would say is there are a few vital differences there, and the main one I would say is when the foul is actually committed. Now listen, sometimes these players take an age to actually fall to the ground, but when the foul is actually committed, which was a foul by Tosin Adarabioyo, it was inside Liverpool's half, whereas when the foul is committed by Saliba, it's well inside Arsenal's half. So I think that you could argue that it was more of a clear-cut opportunity to score, but the main difference I would actually make between the two situations is the foul itself. Now, sometimes the foul cannot be too bad, but it's the fall that can do the damage, right? And the fall that Jota took was one that looked possibly even more damaging than the fall that led to the Saliba red card. But actually, the foul was a lot softer. So realistically, I think that would I have been surprised to have seen Tosin Adarabioyo sent off in context of what had happened with Saliba the day before? No, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I do think there were key differences there. And I actually think that was a call that was made that was correct.
Well, the main thing that we've been hearing for as long as I've been a kid, right? Like watching football even. Last man back. That's the thing that we've always been told. He's last man back, goal scoring opportunity, red card. Was anyone, in doubt that it should have been a red card? Did anyone think? Because there's this argument that, well, he could sprint here and it doesn't automatically mean he's going to control the ball. It doesn't automatically mean he's even going to get a shot off. Does that all of a sudden, all that context matter now? Because for me, it's been very much the letter of the law. Last man back, you get sent off. That's how it works.
That's how I've always seen it and subscribed to it. Like, once you're the last man, I don't care if there's people like to the side a little bit that may be able to run over and cover. You don't know if they're going to be able to cover. So I feel like if you're the last man and you make that decision to make the foul, you're doing that because in your head, you feel like I am the last man. There's no one else is going to be able to cover for this or atone for this mistake. So both of them were desperate challenges, in my opinion. I can see what Joey's saying in the sense that, the Arsenal one was way more forward on the pitch. But like you just said, Brian, if you're the last man, and that's how I've always seen it, you gotta go. Because literally the person's probably going to be one-on-one. Even if someone manages to track and follow them down, there's still at some point, whether it's closer to the goal or a bit further out, at some point they're going to have a one-on-one with the keeper.
Do you think
we've got to remember as well that Arsenal are really good at this dark art stuff, and I think we've seen Arteta.
They're not going to like you in the comments. No,
but that's
their phrase right now.
I don't think that's necessarily like a negative point. Like, I actually think they should be commended for some of the stuff they do. I wish Chelsea, my team would do it more often, to be honest with you. Yeah. But what I do think he's overstepped the line here in that it was a clumsy challenge. Obviously, as you guys rightly say, it's the last man, and I don't necessarily think that he needed to do it. Obviously, the guy goes through one-on-one, he has a chance to score, but Evan Nielsen, looks pretty good, but there's no guarantee that he goes and scores that. So I do think it completely changes the game at a point in which Arsenal didn't need to do it. So I do think it was a bit of a mistake from Saliba. And we have to say one thing, the biggest mistake isn't necessarily even in terms of this game, it's in terms of the next game. Now, obviously, the rules are that this is only a one-game ban. Obviously, there's been some comment on that, whether it's 1 or 3, but it's clearly 1. But that next game is Liverpool, and not having Saliba for that game, could be the difference between a win or a loss.
It's massive, especially when Arsenal, for me, this season just haven't looked the same as last season. It's not like they've looked bad, but they've just not looked the same. And in games against lesser opposition, we've seen Man City go down to 10 men before and still dominate the ball, still control a game. Arsenal didn't look like they could do that. Like Bournemouth were great, to be fair to them. I've got to give them a shout out as well. Like,
it's funny, isn't it, right? Because obviously we've heard a lot and most notably from Arsenal fans about these boys being the king of set pieces. And you can see why they got so much height, you know what I mean? But I tell you what, that set piece from Bournemouth yesterday from the corner completely bamboozled Arsenal. It was intelligent and it was well taken as well. So I think that when you look at the manner of the defeat, you've always got to take into the context of it that obviously they played an hour of the game more with extra time with 10 men. But at the same time, I thought Bournemouth were really, really good yesterday. And I don't think that it's one of these results where you would come away from it and go, right, red card. Like the way Bournemouth played yesterday, I think maybe even if they had 11 men, they'd have still had a chance of taking some form of result in that game.
I think
one thing Arsenal haven't had to deal with as well, all of last season, and we were saying it over and over again with other teams, you know, Newcastle, significant injuries, Chelsea, significant injuries. There were other teams that had loads of injuries. Arsenal were pretty lucky. Obviously, they had Timber out for the entire season, pretty much got off scot-free. You have to say, losing Odegaard, losing Saka, like they don't look as potent as they did without them. So, and obviously Timber was injured as well for this game.
They got Sterling.
Yeah,
bro,
Sterling.
Some of the Arsenal fans are going mental about Sterling already. I seen one guy, he was saying even paying half his wages is a fucking rip-off.
Mate, he's yet to have a good game for Arsenal. He had a game in the cup, I think it was against Bolton or something, when he sort of looked all right, but he's yet to have a good game. And Saka was a huge miss for them yesterday. And another thing that we need to speak about of Arsenal, right, is like, at the moment, we're looking at it, 3 red cards in 5 games. That doesn't look good. And as much as I didn't really agree with the Declan Rice red card, I thought that was a bit too, too much of a technicality, and I didn't think it was fair. But at the same time, a lot of people will look at that and they'll go, okay, so Arsenal have a discipline problem this season. But I'd question, like, is it a discipline problem or is it a problem with dealing with pressure? Because in those high pressure situations, in those moments, you're so desperate to actually arrive at where you've been sort of teasing to get to over the last couple of seasons, that I think that can play into it. And I think that, yes, of course, when you see the bookings and you see the red cards, you'd obviously say it's discipline, but I think pressure plays just as much of a factor there.
I actually seen a stat. I don't know how true this is because it's off fucking Twitter, so God knows. But apparently, since Arteta took charge, they were saying that Arsenal have had the most red cards. Now, I totally think that Joey's onto something though with this, like, we all have seen, like, you get a window when you have a great team assembled, especially when you're going head to head with Man City and Pep Guardiola, you get a window. And if they stumble, if they have an off season, you have to be there to capitalize. And they've not managed that yet. And I do think pressure is playing a role. And it's not just in the whole team, it's in individual moments. You look at Martinelli through on goal, 1v1, and he snatches at it and he doesn't manage to bury that. And he's a player for me where originally I thought you're a fucking top player coming up, you're going to be the guy. He had that really standout season. And when you don't have an Odegaard and a Saka, you look to those other men and he wasn't there. And I think that, if I don't know how much patience fans are going to have with him for much longer, because really, that's the type of thing that happens where people go, enough's enough, mate. We need someone who's actually going to be able to bury that.
They're already turning on him. Like I've seen, even my Arsenal mates have said he's not good enough. And the thing is, when you got a team where maybe 10-9 players are operating at such a high level and you're just a few off of it, it stands out like a sore thumb. And that's kind of what's happening with Martinelli. But I just think when I look at that Arsenal result against Bournemouth, you can't lose. I know they got 10 men. I know, but they were there before. They were there, was it against Brighton? They were there against Man City. They almost beat Man City. Man City, they almost held on, and Man City got it right at the last minute with John Stones. So I think with Bournemouth, if you can't win the game, you just don't lose. That's when you're looking at the calendar and you're looking at the 38 fixtures, there's certain games that you're thinking, if I'm going to win this title, we're not saying you got to be perfect and do the Invincibles in, 05, but there's certain fixtures you can't lose, because you can't lose. If you're going up against Man City for the title, you can't lose more than 3 games, 2-3 games a season. And you don't want one of them to be Bournemouth. No disrespect to Bournemouth.
Is there any questioning of Arteta in this? We all know he's done a great job, But when you've got a fully fit team, you can afford to be super defensive because you lob that ball higher up the field. You've got players who don't really need all the tactics in the world to get it right? You've got extreme talent who can carve a team up without really much instruction. But in the event that, those players are missing, you do have to be a bit more adventurous, in my opinion. You do have to understand that you have to take a few more risks and commit men forward a bit more than usual. Otherwise, you can forget it, really. And I feel like he's stuck to those same tactics without those key players there to do the damage for him, without really needing to commit men in the same way. And I feel like he's going to have to change that, and he's going to have to take more risks moving forward if he's going to be without Odegaard and Saka in these coming up games.
So I don't know if this is an Arteta problem. I'm sure every manager will tell you if they had the ability and the funds to go and spend the money that they would, and maybe Arsenal weren't in a situation where they did, and maybe that's why you see the loan signings of Raheem Sterling and whatnot. But I think that maybe they put a little bit and it's always going to sound like this is coming from a personal place because it's Kai Havertz and whatnot. I actually really rate Kai Havertz, and I think that he's proved a lot of people wrong, including myself, of how clinical he can be at Arsenal so far, because I really didn't think it'd go well for him. But what I would say is I think they've overrated how much he's going to be able to bring to that team, because when you look, right, at the goal tally for this season, 15 goals scored so far this season. It's not bad. It's not bad reading. It's only 2 less than the original London club in Chelsea, but it is a far cry from the 21 goals that they had scored last season at this same point. So I think, like, firepower wise, it's that thing of saying, yeah, they need someone, but at the same time, you can very easily counter it by going, woohoo. And realistically, there aren't that many players that you can go and get in there. But it does look with Arsenal like 2 or 3 injuries can really, really derail their squad. And like, again, to bring it back to Chelsea, for example, we had an injury crisis last season, but this season, I believe that because of the ridiculous depth we have, and I know a lot of people will have sort of ill feeling around that and around the way that we've been able to do it, we could have 2 or 3 injuries, and I don't feel like it would impact our team as much. Whereas when you've got those boys missing, it's very, very hard for them to be anywhere near as creative as they have been.
I also can't believe, after challenging for as long as they have, they didn't go and get someone who will guarantee you a certain number of goals. I understand that Havertz has proved some of us wrong, and we're like, oh, actually, he's an impactful player. He's helping. He should have came as a second priority to a goal machine. And even if it's not like, someone who's going to guarantee you 30 a season, just someone who you can go, no doubt, the amount of money they spend on Havertz, they could have gotten that. And I'm looking at that now, thinking, in a game where you just need someone to stab it home and to just nick you a draw.
Yeah, but I think they thought
that is exactly what you were missing in that game.
They thought Jesus would be that person. So even if he isn't going to hit 20 goals a season, his experience at Man City and the titles he's won, he scored a decent amount of goals for Man City in his time there, despite not being the main man. They thought he would chip in more, but he's gone off the boil completely.
They pay Havertz Josh, what is it? 280 grand a week?
Yeah, let's call it 300. Why
not?
Call
it 300.
Let's
call it 350 if you want. But what I'm saying is they pay Havertz that sort of money. They do pay, it's not Man United wages, but they do pay big wages to some of their players. And as much as it would have hurt me being that we were after him all summer, Victor Osimhen, he's gone to where? Galatasaray. Do you know what I mean? Like, is there not a point when maybe you go in there and you go, do you know what? I can get him for 60 odd million, similar price to what they paid for Kai Havertz, by the way, and I can get him on similar sort of wages. So I think you're right. I think they could have done with someone that's able to offer them that sort of clinicality. But I will just say, for Arsenal, so far this season, they've played Villa, they've played Spurs, they've played Brighton, and they've played City, and that's all within their first 8 games. Whereas last season, after 8, they'd only played Man United, who, let's be honest, weren't having a great season, and they'd played Spurs, and that was a game that we watched live in the studio, and that was a home game, and obviously at the Emirates, normally goes fairly well not fairly well, but it's not as hard as going away at Tottenham. So I do think that they have had a harder start to this season. So I've got to give them a little bit of credit there, but yeah, it's been a bit underwhelming.
But they dropped points against Bournemouth, not against those big teams. They got the draw against City, didn't they? but you know, they've dropped points against Bournemouth. That's the key thing here is if you drop points to those kind of teams, then winning the title is going to be difficult, isn't it?
Well, they're 3 points behind City now, lads. 3 points behind City, 4 points behind Liverpool. And more worryingly is those two sides look fine. And Arsenal don't look fine. Do you know, like Arsenal are doing well, in my opinion, given the circumstances, to keep putting points on the table. But I'm not looking thinking, yo, this is the season. It just doesn't feel like it.
To be fair, though, you look at City, City scraped that win, didn't they? I mean, they absolutely scraped it. I wouldn't say that City are looking imperious.
But then is that not the difference, Josh? Is that not the difference between champions and teams that finish second?
What, they get the wins? Yeah.
Not just that. City are notoriously known for clicking into gear the second half of the season anyway. Like the fact that they're undefeated still now after 8 games and they're kind of just getting the points on the board and not at their best and without Rodri. I know they've got world-class players all over the pitch, but they're going to be without Rodri the whole season. We can if we're betting men, we can kind of guarantee that in the second half of the season is when they're really going to kick on and become a juggernaut. So I think for them to just get over the line the way they're doing it right now is cool for City. I think for Arsenal right now, the most alarming thing is that they're not, as you know, the Gen Z like to say, cooking. They're not cooking at all. They have no seasoning. Nothing's going on. They ain't even got the pans out yet. They're just, I don't know what they're doing. They're just using the air fryer right now. They really need to get involved. They really start like putting teams to the sword.
And not only
I haven't looked at Arsenal. I haven't seen Arsenal have like a game this season where you're like, ooh, like you're not.
No, because they were creaming Arsenal when they beat us at our ground, which in fairness, you know, it's a North London derby. They got the win, but it was a 1-0 win on a set piece. If you looked at the stats, and I know stats don't tell the whole picture, we kind of did more than them in all the metrics, but the pundits and everyone was like, well, it was a great defensive display from Arsenal away from home. And then they, you know, amazing set piece with their amazing set piece coach, who, by the way, in this game, you know, didn't get them defending on set pieces. It was the other side of the thing. No one's talking about that. But this is what I'm saying. I don't think they've really been cooking this season. I think they've just been plodding along, getting points on the board. And because they've been undefeated, everyone's gone, oh yeah. But like now they've lost the game. Everyone's kind of looking at it like, hold on, we're not actually playing that well.
Yeah. You know what else, right? You were saying, Craig, about that City clicking into gear in the second half of the season. Well, listen, there's 5.5 weeks now between now and the start of December. Crazy. City's hardest fixture in that game, and it is a notoriously hard fixture for them, by the way, is you boys. It's Spurs.
Yeah.
So it's not now like, yeah, okay, but City have now got to go Villa away and Liverpool away, and they've got some hard fixtures after that, but you would imagine they're going to continue to accumulate a lot of points between now and the 1st of December.
100%.
And Liverpool look serious this season. They're flying. We'll wrap this one up there, lads. But one final question is like, do you think Arsenal can turn this around and push on? Or do you expect now for Arsenal to just sit around that top 4, still have a good season, but not that like the last 2 seasons where they pushed Man City to the bitter end?
I think the Liverpool game will tell us. I think this Liverpool game's massive. I know Saliba's missing, Odegaard's potentially missing. I don't know what's going on with Saka. These are important players. I prayed for days like this as a Spurs fan last season when they were just on that title charge. I was like, lose some of these key players. And it's happened now, and we're kind of seeing the effects of it, how important these individuals are for that Arsenal team. They looked like they were just, I don't know, they were just missing something there. Like the star boys weren't out. And I think this Liverpool game, if they lose at home to Liverpool at the Emirates, I can't see them winning the title. I just can't. You can't lose at home. If they come away with a draw, they're still in it. But if they lose,
it's not just what that tells us about Arsenal. It's what it tells us about Liverpool as well.
Yeah.
It makes everyone go, oh shit, Arne Slot has got this slot firing.